We'll start with the song here as we did last time, and this one is it's really a joining of two different songs. One is "God of Beauty," which is a line or a couplet from Paramahansa Yogananda, and the second is a Beauty Way, which is a Navajo term. Now, Beauty Way is kind of a loose translation of a Navajo term that actually refers to much more than just traditional beauty that we think of, but perfection, harmony, goodness, success, normality, well-being, blessedness, happiness.
Yes.
And I can only also believe that Paramahansa Yogananda's version, which says God of Beauty is now reigning in the temple of my heart, also refers to some of the same, more around the inquiry around beauty, love, truth, and goodness kind of stuff. So when we talk about beauty in this song, it's really about really divinity and what we hold to be most sacred, I believe. So this is a combination based on the first one came from the Dances of Universal Peace, and then the second one is my interpretation and version of the song, together with kind of like based on other interpretations around it, my music basically. So here it is.
Cool.
God of beauty is now reigning in the temple of my heart, of my heart, of my heart, of my heart, of my heart. God of beauty is now reigning in the temple of my heart, of my heart, of my heart, of my heart, of my heart. God of beauty is now reigning in the temple of my heart, of my heart, of my heart. I walk the beauty way, hey na na, hey na na. I walk the beauty way, hey na na, hey na na. I walk the beauty way, hey na na, hey na na. I walk the beauty way, hey na na, hey na na. Beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty above me, beauty below me, beauty within me, beauty all around me. I walk and speak and act with beauty all around me. I see beauty, I release my wounds of beauty, I fill myself with healing beauty. Temple of my heart, of my heart, of my heart, of my heart, of my heart.
Woo-hoo! Bravo. That was the key that unlocks the freedom of the spirit. Well sung.
Yeah, so we agreed to meet today to talk about the issue of freedom, and we tend to believe, and freedom is a huge issue right now. It's a hot issue. It's a contested issue. I mean, I think we can all agree essentially, what freedom is in general terms: freedom of belief and thought, speech, association. freedom to act as long as we're not harming others, freedom of movement, which we've come to take for granted in this world, though that's been abridged. Mm-hmm. And then kind of later, more recent conversations in the last decade or two on the idea of sovereignty or freedom of man and women, of man and woman in or under kind of a natural law framework, which essentially reifies what the Constitution said is we hold these truths to be self-evident. That, in other words, there is a priori condition of freedom in our nature or in creation itself, and we are participants in that. And of course, we've seen a lot about how freedom has been abridged recently: censorship, suppression of choice, for example, medical freedom, various mandates that have shut down businesses. People have lost jobs. We see, of course, examples around the world, whether it's, Falun Gong in China, the suppression of women in other countries in the Middle East in particular. And of course, in the interim, the opposite side, we're being pushed by the internet, which has given us a lot of freedom of information. But it's well known and understood that the freedom or the needs of the public are not well served by the institutions of the ruling elite. We have multiple studies that show that, and I think we all kind of intuitively know that. And so, when we think about freedom in our modern world, it has, in a way, especially recently, become identified as a no-holds-barred kind of attitude, which can lead to a kind of licentiousness, kind of like an anything-goes mentality, which is often observed and can lead to things like hyper-materialism or, addictive behavior, self-damaging actions, casual sex, drugs, exploitation of various kinds, survival of the fittest rationales. If my freedom can trump anybody's freedom, then that's not a good thing. And, in today's world, conservatives and libertarians, it seems to me, are often seen as the water carriers for the notion of personal liberty, at least. And of course, one such criticism against that is that it comes at the cost of fairness, equality, or care for the environment. This can lead to things like tragedy of the commons, which holds that a greedy actor can undermine the basis of shared well-being by cutting corners and gaining a competitive advantage at the expense of exploiting labor or the environment. And so freedom in that sense is not necessarily a good thing, because we exist, don't we, Paul, in a context. We're not just billiard balls out in the universe flying in any direction we want. We live in a universe. It is a universe that is largely based on cooperation, though it has competitive elements to it. So I'm kind of looking at this question of freedom in today's world, and also kind of asking the question, do conditions that we see around us, ultimately define our what freedom is? In other words, are we free or not free because of conditions in the world, or is freedom something else, or is it both and? So I guess with that introduction, I'll just pitch it over to you for whatever pops out of your brain.
Yeah. Well, I was reflecting on this when you said, let's have a chat about freedom and, what is freedom? And I'm here in Vermont. We have a restoration council that I'm part of, and we talk about freedom. And when we talk about it, it's a combination for us of caring and compassion and collaboration. And in Vermont, we happen to have a state motto that's freedom and unity. And it basically is honoring the freedom of the individual soul and the common good of being together in a community. And so it's kind of, I've surrounded myself in that, as have you. You're right in New Hampshire. And I think there's so many levels of looking at this for me, but the context, the environment in which we're living in this 3D reality at this time in space, where the planet is experiencing, at least in our experience, the ultimate in separation, control, and fear. I really am being present to what is the gift and opportunity in that. And does that, in fact, affect my freedom? And so we can look at it in some of the different levels of things that you laid out really beautifully there. Freedom to travel. Okay. I still can choose to get on a plane, but I'll tell you, I have no desire to, based on masking requirements and the shot requirements. And there's limited things now. You stand in line for 3 hours. So the reality that's been created is something that isn't pleasing. And yet I still get to choose whether I want to go through all that to take a trip somewhere. I'm looking at family situations where many families aren't free to express things anymore because it creates so much separation, fear, anger, whatever it is. So are we truly not free, or are we free to choose to disagree? And that's the path that we're taking. So what is freedom? And at what level do we want to look at this? Because I think for me, it's different at different levels of being. And I'm present in this reality, but what I'm seeing is it's gifted me through all the separation, all the control, the outer signs that maybe I'm not as free as I was, but that's not real. Because I still am free to choose how I'm going to respond in this world. And I still are free to live by the principles that I live by. And yeah, there may be some stress in doing that I didn't have before, but I also recognize that everybody on this planet is sharing in this journey from their own perfect soul experience. So they're having to look at their own freedom. And what is that? Freedom to earn money for my family, but I can't go to work anymore because I'm being required to wear a mask. Is that impacting your freedom truly? It is from that limited form. Maybe I don't work that job, but maybe that's opened up some freedom within you to create a different life. That's really quite beautiful. So for me, it's trying to get out of the duality, thinking about freedom or not free, and recognizing that who I am and who you are, John Michael, and who our family members and our friends and your Rise Up New Hampshire group and my Vermont Restoration Council group, we are source creator beings, which is infinite freedom. And it's condensed into this one level of reality. And we're being gifted with the illusion that we're losing our freedoms. And are we truly? So I'm kind of looking at the questions from a lot of different angles, but I jump right in. That's just kind of a short.
Well, I like what you're saying, because it is pointing to, this undeniable level that, even if I was in a prison cell, I could experience freedom. Now, we could, of course, talk about all the ways in which consciousness can move without a body, and whether it's remote viewing or, just, meditation, there's all kinds of ways you can see one situation. I have to think that, and I think Nelson Mandela, talked about it after his long incarceration, that, he was, he describes what he describes as his experiences, still a man with freedom, right? A man who's free to respond. Now, do we have, I guess, the issue that is, up for today, generally in the world, as you were kind of talking about the mandates and stuff like that, is, even if we, can respond, not everyone, we don't have a social structure that makes it easy for people to just say, well, I don't need that job. They're requiring the job, so I don't need that job. Some people can do that, but some people, a bunch of kids, mortgage, in an area that doesn't have a lot of opportunities. We're seeing, the apparent designed destruction of food processing facilities, this egg factory that was firebombed, I guess, or whatever. And we're not talking about isolated incidents. We're talking about now 20 or more incidences in the last year or so where these facilities have gone up. We saw a similar thing relative to hydroxychloroquine, the various factories being, all of a sudden catching fires. Like, yeah, I wonder what that's about. So there is a dance between, the freedom I can experience in my heart, soul, consciousness, and what we are able to do, and the need to, both be operating within the freedom of consciousness, but also
Yes.
out in the world to expand the embodied experience of freedom. And one could say the last 50 years, certainly, or since the 60s, where a new kind of postmodern consciousness came into being, for all the problems it may have also driven to the surface more recently, was an expression of um, a communitarian impulse, if you will, that was itself a reaction to a more individualistic impulse that came with the whole modernist era of, the negative aspects of the modernist era, which is kind of unchecked materialism, kind of like this exploitation of the environment, exploitation of labor, marginalization of classes of people. We certainly saw, children being exploited early on and then workers themselves, as they left the land and came to cities, had to fight for the weekends and a shorter work week, and in order to experience the freedom. And one could argue quite well that without all of that prior effort at freedom, we would not have had the later experience of time and freedom, time that you and I have experienced in our lives, and everyone we know realistically. Even if you have a full-time job, you have time and freedom to explore so many different possibilities, books, programs, education of various kinds, art, music, things that you can now be exposed to from around the world in the last 25 years because of the internet, which of course has its own problems. But so I want you to address a little bit more, how we should be thinking, or what we might be thinking about this relationship of an obvious movement towards more embodied freedom in the world, but also juxtaposed against this back and forth from a more individualistic impulse to a more communitarian impulse, which oftentimes seem at war with each other. So, how do we start thinking about this if we are free in our consciousness, but we're also wanting to bring this experience into our day-to-day lives, into our communities, into our jobs, really into the structures of our social institutions, which seem to be singularly, if I may say, designed to not, and largely for most of them, to not be promoting freedom, but to kind of get bogged down kind of in bureaucracy and rule making that, at the end of the day, confounds often the notion of freedom, because there's no real representation often, and there's a very, very slow kind of response to the kind of rapid changes we're seeing in the world.
Well, for me, I think it's going to be important to be able to, not to get too woo-woo, but to consider again what the opportunity is here in this reality. And everything you just spoke, I totally can get into that. But I'm also into looking at this in terms of, even though on one level in my mind or my emotions or physically even, there's the illusion or the reality of having less freedom, it doesn't affect the freedom of who I am. And what it does do is inspire me, because maybe I can't leave the job because of the money and whatnot. But the fact that perhaps I get to discuss this with a neighbor who's also going there, and we say, you know what, I just feel stuck, this is really tough. And maybe the two of you said, we've always wanted to build houses. A friend of mine can't hire workers. Maybe we just need to make a shift, and we can still make enough money to get by, but doing something proactive to create that reality that you're witnessing. And the more I've gotten into this, I go back to ancient times, and I go back to the native peoples, and I started hearing about some of the horrendous things. I knew some of them, but in terms of native peoples had a whole spiritual integration with the earth and with the star beings and with spirit. And when they had it for 16,000 years or so, a long, long time before other continents started interacting. And as we took over the native peoples, the indigenous peoples, their ritual was prevented from doing. They had to create a sun dance, dancing around a fire, rather than these sacred chambers that could actually bring in energy from other beings. And in a way, their freedom was curtailed. So I started looking, and I think I mentioned this in maybe one of our earlier podcasts, but it's still profound to me, how when I honestly sat and looked at the social systems that make up our reality, the legal system, the medical system, the education system, the money system. If you honestly look at these systems and what's happening in the world now, we're getting the next glimpse of, hey, it's just the next step in that process. They were all based on control, separation, and fear. And we're infinite beings. So how is it we're creating these controlled, separate, power-grabbing realities that we've done this for thousands and thousands of years, but it's almost like it's spiraling into this birth time if it's gotten so obvious. And maybe it's because we're all waking up a little bit more. And maybe because we can't travel as much, now we invite a few friends over to play guitar and do some drumming at night. We have a neighborhood. It's happening right now here. Our two neighbors down, the farmer's ready to retire. He's had some health issues and his kids don't want to farm. We just happen to have a casual conversation. All of a sudden, one of the young men who's working here as part of our little community, our group, is going to hopefully take over the farming for him. And we're going to set up a CSA and an education center. And it's coming out of this fear and out of the lockdown and out of the separation. So I'm seeing it as an opportunity. But it's where we put our attention. And to me, the heart is key in all of this, because it's very easy to be affected by radio waves, by TV, by commercials, the media, even the internet, the censoring that's being done. We're getting pieces of information. And I think the more it's bringing us to go into our hearts, into our divinity, and into that place that truly is free forever. And from that place, we're creating now. So yes, we can go out and start addressing areas from our heart, not that anything is bad, but that, this doesn't resonate with freedom. And so we have a few other people in our community, and maybe some people are protesters, and maybe some people play music, some people are healers, and we bring that energy together, and together we're honoring the freedom and the ability to be the change we want to see in the world. It's that, I forget who was it, Bucky Fuller, somebody said that. But I think this is the gift of this time, is it's bringing us to the truth of who we are. What is it we want to create? And we're not alone in this. So it's being able to share our feelings, to share when we're feeling stuck, and also share together, what can we do here that's going to be an example? Because again, blaming or getting into division where all those politicians are bad. No, they may be asleep. They may be bribed. They may have gotten people abused that we don't know their path. So, but if we can show a system that actually is honoring people and they can be part of the conversation, because we're all at a different part of this circle of freedom. And it starts within our hearts, I believe. And so I don't know if that's, jump in there and follow up with that, see if that resonates.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And, my next question is, you've implicitly answered, but I think it's worth, explicitly exploring a bit more, which is this notion, and going back to my comment about this kind of back and forth that we're having between, more communitarian versus more individualistic impulses. You could say the modernism came out of earlier traditionalism, which was more communitarian. Mm-hmm. Modernism is more individualistic. It also introduced the notion of universal rights and of course progress, the scientific method, rationalism, and materialism, and to the degree that it's kind of gone off in the area of scientism, which is part of the separation mentality that sees everything as separate parts. Yeah. Someone was talking to me the other day about these wonderful, brilliant minds can figure out how to create something that'll strip paint off of something, but they're not thinking about what do you do with that result of that, and
Right.
is that harmful? And now it seems we are, living in a really a pandemic of poisoning. I see it really more than a virus or anything else from my point of view,
Yeah.
because you've got, we've talked about this before, a very high level of number of kids, more than 50% in the US, that develop some kind of chronic condition. I mean, really? How could this not be, the Apollo project of the day? Why would that be just kind of like thrown off to the side as like, well, that's just what it is? And then, of course, we know, adults are ill and stressed out, and the people who seem to be, dying from COVID or being the most impacted, were those with multiple comorbidities. Well, why are we ending up with these multiple comorbidities? Why that? So, so the question, is it beg
Mhm.
as we go from one kind of evolution to the other, one response to the other. The progressive movement was meant to bring in this higher ethic of communitarianism. Now they've kind of gone on the extremes to cancel culture and think what we think, or you'll be removed, and that's now being picked up by and really reflected by corporations like social media companies and others, and that's another movement towards intolerance, separation. We're seeing it now lead to a totalitarianism, and I'm trying to imagine what this jump will be to the next version of a world in which we are free as individuals, but at the same time, it's not really a but,
Yeah.
we are understanding that we exist within a larger framework, and that we are ultimately all downstream from each other. Whatever I put out, in the air, in the water, in the ground, is eventually, in the mind sphere, in the noosphere, that eventually that's going to trickle down to other people, and so we can't escape responsibility. And it does seem that this notion of responsibility gets short shrift. On the other hand, this kind of push towards a totalitarian vision of again, using your word, control, separation and control, is toxic, and it feels like a very knee jerk and limited response, but also one that's being pushed by certain interests.
Yeah.
So how can we, how do we think about this freedom within a
Yeah.
context of something larger? And
Well,
and then the final question there is, does that mean that our freedom, if we're aware of this larger context, say the more infinite game that we're part of, does that mean we're abridging our freedoms? Does that mean, is that not a good thing if we have to think about what other people, how they might be affected? I mean, so this is a conversation, even though elements of it are obvious to people, there are other elements that are not. And even the drive towards medical freedom is being seen by some as, oh, those people who are so selfish, they just can't, they're not thinking of other people, they're not taking the jab, they're not wearing the mask, whatever. So there's a large amount of confusion, some of it by design, some of it, being picked up and amplified.
we have all created this. We have polluted ourselves, the planet, all life, to bring us the opportunity, just like that first song you did. It was a key that unlocks, to me, the spirit of freedom. Freedom, I think, the more I'm being present with this with you, is the key, which is love, that basically transcends the duality of the individual and the common good. And if you look at the three principles that I like to look at in terms of freedom, the caring, the compassion, and collaboration, when there's enough, I guess, maturity of integration of one's soul and who we are eternally into how we are walking in the world, but not perhaps of the world, that's where we integrate that into a beautiful co-creation, because there is the honoring of differences. And rather than getting into the next totalitarian or the next dictator or the next fascist or the next communist control system, I mean, how long is it going to take people to just do basic research on the history of this world And war and conflict has never brought the peace that I think most everybody is looking for in their heart. A lot of people aren't, and they're on the war thing, but maybe they've learned enough of that. I feel we're on the cusp, that because the intensity that I think everyone I talk to is feeling it, whatever way they're experiencing. So some people it's emotional. For some people, they're confused and they're just exhausted in their mental thinking. Other people physically are dealing with, illness, or we're destructuring the false realities of duality and control and separation, so that the birth of freedom and the integration of the divinity and specialness of each individual soul and the common good of the collective become one. They become a spiral of co-creation. And my sense is, if not to get too esoteric, but when I think about source, and I think I've said this perhaps before, but I see it as this wave, this beautiful spiral wave of everything, where it has all the individual separate pieces, but together it's creating this beauty, this light. And I think we've had to have, as a soul, an experience of being in the darkest of the dark, of control and separation and fear, in this level of reality and seemingly the limitation of time and space, that we have to kind of birth through that false reality to recognize who we truly are. And I think in a relatively short time, we could heal the planet, heal humanity, raise up our frequency, and have a beautiful life, singing these songs together, growing food together, having the work that you want to do that's contributing to your community, that gives you joy. We can start doing that. We're doing it right now. We can start doing that tomorrow. But everybody is in their own spot on the spiral of recognition, of dealing with maybe past life trauma, maybe current life trauma. And so having compassion for that, but also being willing to speak our truth from compassion and from caring, and then collaborating with each other as best we can, recognizing that we're different and we come at things, have different realities, but that doesn't mean we can't work and create together something really beautiful. So I don't know, how's that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it provokes a lot of other thoughts for me, not the least of which is, working to articulate for me, with others, just a discussion or awareness around, what is, what are the potentials of, I'll use the word consciousness, because if you haven't gone beyond the mind, and it reminds me of that T-shirt or the saying about meditation, it's not what you think. It's like, and it's like there are dimensions of experience which can be accessed through prayer, contemplation, meditation,
walking in the woods,
being out in
nature.
Yep, drumming, chanting, various psychedelics, if you will, being under the stars, being in love, there are so many different ways to access that, but we're not talking necessarily about a temporary state so much as, working to develop this as a more of a regular feature of consciousness, because
a way of being in the world, a way of being.
Right. If you're not experiencing the freedom within, right, which is really what you're pointing to, then and no one can, if what we're saying doesn't resonate, I can imagine a time in my life where I'd be listening and be like, what are they talking about? But it's like it has to be experienced. It's like you've got to go over a bridge to that other side, at least to taste it once or twice or a few times to know what we're talking about. So I'm wondering.
And John Michael, let me just throw one out, because most everyone here has gone to a concert with beautiful music, maybe their favorite musician, their favorite group, and say they've had a stressful week. They've lost their home and this and that, but they're out with their wife and they had a glass of wine and they're out in this theater, and all of a sudden this song comes on that has wonderful, wonderful connections for them, and everything disappears. They're in the creative process of beauty. So it's not that that doesn't exist with them without that, but it's like, this is the kind of experiences that the more we're able to share together through things like you and I are doing, and then our communities, people in our communities are doing, and reminding people of experiences they've had when they weren't separate. They, like you said, being in love, playing music and drumming, where you're just into the drumming, you're into the beat of life. You're walking in nature and your breath's taken away by a beautiful waterfall. Go sit by that waterfall, because that's life, that's source, that's creative energy, constant change. You're not separate from it. You're with it. You're one with that. You can feel it in every cell of your body.
So,
Like,
so this is what you mean, or is this what you mean when you say being in touch with your divinity, or is it one way of it?
That's one way of it, I think.
Yeah, because I'm really wanting to just make sure that we're, as we talk and as different people listen to this, they're understanding that we're not talking about a belief system,
No,
but we're really talking about an experiential dimension of being that can be accessed and in a variety of ways, including through religious practices, correct? But that it, as we access it, and if we access it, and if we work to make it more of a daily way of being, the things that we're talking about regarding the understanding of the internal aspects of freedom become more possible, become more grounded, and at the same time, for those not necessarily well versed in it, if they're coming to this for the first time, or if they're maybe dealing with an illness, as you were saying, or dealing with a trauma or some life condition, they may need support, which is a way of expanding, right?
Yeah.
And you're also talking about expanding one's circle of care, right? It's like
Yes.
it's like it always kind of struck me as, that when I was younger, is that, wow, parents really love you, and your parents really love you, you really love your family, for some of us anyway.
Yeah, not everyone, but yeah.
But there are those bonds are there. But then, as you get out, as the circle gets bigger, it's like, well, your neighbors, whatever, and then your community, well, somewhat less, and the world out there, well, you care in a kind of disembodied sort of impersonal way, but can we care for everybody? I mean, oh my God, and the notion of care can be overdone. It can be twisted, as we've seen, and inverted by the response to the pandemic, for example, using care to say that if you don't do a certain thing,
you don't care,
providing the false binary. So yeah, I'm wondering if what more you might want to say just about for people coming from any of a number of faith traditions, or atheists maybe, or just not feeling aligned in any particular way. What is it, if they're wondering about this experience of seeing the unity, what more would you say about that? And
I'd invite them to consider remembering a time in their lives. And it may not be for 100% of the people, but most everyone can remember at least one time in their life where they felt absolute joy. And maybe remembering what it was like if you had a good childhood, being a child before you got educated and before people told you what to do, and you're out with your, being Davy Crockett, or you're out there, as Chief Sitting Bull on your horse, and you're just having fun in creating and being one out in nature. That was your whole focus, your whole being. That is within us still. The separation, the control, the fear, that's been laid on us over millennia. And most of us, for 60 years or 70 years and 80 years, we've been well programmed in this box that's created our belief systems. And if people are willing to just sit for a minute and reflect on a time when they were creative or doing something just so different from what they'd done, and how much joy they had in that is available to you each and every moment. And right now, in the outer world, it's not so attractive for most of us. It's really quite challenging. So what's the alternative? You fight and create a war, or do you take that as an opportunity to remember who you are, remember or do something fun, put on a funny movie, you know, go work in the garden, whatever it is for each of us that can bring us that moment of joy, and then share that with a family member or a friend if that's possible. And the more we do it together, you know, the analogy we've talked about before, you know, we're each like a rock, and you throw us into that pond of life. That ripple, our energy, our words, our thoughts, our actions, that is touching all of creation. And that may be a stretch for people to consider, but it's absolutely true. And this is not me talking. This is physicists, this is scientists, this is spiritual leaders from all faith traditions. Everything is connected, and everything is frequency. We're biophoton beings. So it's like tuning your guitar. We're right now, all our guitars are out of tune. You know, people are throwing rocks at us. We're up on stage. Hey, play your song, would you? You know, you suck. But maybe if I just tune the guitar a little bit and let go of the distraction, because I love playing music, and I hit the C chord or the G chord, and oh, it sounds good. And I start smiling. I start playing that music, and all of a sudden people start, oh, wow, that sounds pretty good. It's that. It's like we each have to tune this instrument that is us and deal with our beliefs that keep us separate or keep us in fear. If you need physical healing, do something to have someone give you a massage or do some aromatherapy. If you want to just sing a song, just to feel the energy move in a positive, creative way. Those little steps, they're not just helping you, they're helping everybody. And that's real. And I think often we forget of how powerful we are and how much of an impact our lives are having in the world that we live in and participate in. It's not just the people in our house. It's our neighbors. You know, you go by a woman in a store, you know, the other day she dropped a package and I grabbed the door and lifted it up. And she said, oh my God, that was so nice. I said, wow, I got trained well. You know, of course I wasn't an owner because I felt a little self-conscious, but it's just nature to me, you know. If someone is there and you reach out, that little act, they could have been on the verge of driving a car off a bridge. You don't know the impact you're having. And that story, then they share, you know, I met this incredible guy today who just stopped and held the door, picked up my package. We impact the world in ways we just don't, I think people don't think about or maybe have a clue about, but it's real. It affects everything. Like when you walk into a room full of angry people, you can feel that. You can feel yourself kind of close up. But if you go into a room of joyful people singing music together, what does that feel like? That's within you. It's within me to create that. And that then is going to create the change that we want to see in this world. Because we see what we've created up until now, you know, it sucks. It's time to wake up. No more fear, no more separation, no, you know, enough control. You're in control of your thoughts, of your beliefs, of your ability to respond, of your ability to create joy and healing in your life. That's the place that I invite all of us to look at where it's not happening and take baby steps. What's the step I can take in the next hour that's going to give me some joy, or do something that's going to give someone else some joy? That little act, you're going to feel it in your body. And that resonance will keep building. It's like tuning the orchestra. You're going to get all the parts of you all playing together from this frequency of truth of who you truly are, your perfect soul, eternal being. That's why we're here. And that's why all of this has been created. Time to remember, time to go through that birth canal. Yeah, it's a little scary. Yeah, it feels like I'm alone in this journey, but we're all going through it. Mother Earth is going through it. All of creation is going through it because we're connected to all of creation. It's an amazing time to be here. We just have to keep trying to remember and supporting each other as we make the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So, that makes me, think about this fear and confusion. I think that's, fairly common, that, if we, if we join together anew as a community, it's going to be, another control thing. It's going to be, a centralized economy. It's going to be communism. It's going to be totalitarianism. and as people come back into community, which has in many ways been undermined by the modern the modern life to technology. People all caught in their electronic devices, and even further back, even the notion of kind of everybody living in their own little separate houses and taking there's little community there, but the idea of coming back out in community for a lot of people is scary because they're afraid of losing their individuality. They're afraid of being abridged in a group context, and there's a lot to obviously say about that. But one of the things I like to think of is something a teacher told me many years ago, and she said that as I open more to the totality, spiritually speaking, that my individuality would not be suppressed, but paradoxically would be enhanced.
Yeah,
it will be enhanced, and that's hard to see because there's a part of this. I think what you're referring to, these thousands of years of programming, is that if we're taking care of others, if we think about others, we're actually suppressing ourselves in some way. We're not being the fullness that we can be, and it's easy to see examples of people who've done that, and so we take the worst examples and we make those the rule instead of those the exception. And so I'm wondering if you might say something about or what you think about this idea of enhanced individuality coming from an awareness of how we participate in the all in this. I mean, you've said a bunch of stuff about it already, but is there anything else that comes to mind as I raise it that particular framing?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of being a child who's very shy, and the parents are saying, hey, she's a little shy, and what are we going to do? She's kind of on her own, never goes out of her room, just plays with her dolls all the time and talks to them. So they see that she likes playing with the dolls, and so they say, oh, Jenny, we just have a new neighbor that moved here and they don't know anybody. And they have a little girl about your age, and she really has a beautiful collection of dolls, and you think you might want to, we could just have them come over here, and, you could meet in your room if you wanted to, or you could go there. It just starts. And all of a sudden, that little girl has an experience of something that she loves and cares about and feels secure in, also is something that someone else has some interest in. And then she starts to have a little bit of a interchange with someone else. And she starts saying, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then they hear about the little boy down the street who also likes playing with dolls. And then, so it can expand. You just start where people are at, and you're perfectly where you are. You don't have to go anywhere if you don't choose to. That's the freedom of the individual. However, if there's areas in your life, on any level of your life, where you're feeling less than free, or you're feeling discomfort in any way, if you could imagine that you can change that. And what might that look like? What might a first step be? And if you can't imagine, if you have friends around, say, hey, well, how about we try this? And just that act alone, that energy that you're putting out, the invitation, it triggers within someone of unity. So someone wants to connect with me, the individual where I'm feeling separate. It's subtle, but it's powerful. And you'll see that with kids. I remember being little in sports. I was kind of shy as a kid, and I liked to swim because I was always on my own. I didn't care for the racing part, but I liked the getting in and swimming. But the fact is that the more I did it, we had a swim team, and we would sit around and hug each other and huddle before the meet. And that was a step in my connecting with others journey. And, in most kids, that the idea of learning how to play a sport is as much about learning to be part of something greater than yourself. And so if you can start with the things in your own life where you feel comfortable being part of something or connected, being greater than the individual, that then enhances and grows your individuality as a person because it expands you. And then you're able to actually go out and maybe connect with other people that wouldn't have been even possible 2 years ago. But now you're one of the team and you're inviting people to join the team. And so you didn't lose your individuality. You're still your same person, but you grew from the energy of the connecting between the individual and the commons. And you're doing it in a really positive way that isn't threatening. And I think that's a way to start.
Yeah, I call that the geometric expansion of,
Okay,
of
nice.
connectedness, because if I'm by myself, I have myself.
Yeah.
Me, myself, and I. Maybe I have three of me. I'm not sure, but let's just say I have myself, right? And then if I connect with you, I have myself and I have you to reflect and connect with, and explore ideas and value and possibilities and activities. And you also have yourself and me.
Yeah.
So there's actually, if you think about it, there's out of the two comes four.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you imagine a third person being added,
Yeah.
that's 9, because now each of us has the other 2 and ourselves.
Right.
And for you, who I am is different than who you are for me.
Yeah.
And you're seeing different things, and it depends on what's going on, what we ate for breakfast.
Through my filter, your filter, but yeah.
What questions we're asking, what our priorities are, what we're listening to, feeling, wanting. So yeah, it gets geometric so that I expand. Now, if I'm still dealing with early traumas where my will was not permitted, was not allowed, I could not express the full range of my choicefulness, which is not a very uncommon thing for people. So there's there's those kinds of things to heal, but the opportunity is to heal those things, and that can only be done in a frame or a space of awareness and compassion and understanding, and free to explore, free to feel. So when we're finding ourselves feeling things that are uncomfortable, that isn't an example of something bad or an expression of something bad, but it is actually the outplaying of freedom.
Yeah.
Coming into our realm and giving us an opportunity to free up a bit of ourselves, because we all had different experiences. Most of our wounds are psychically are social wounds. It's ways in which we didn't feel heard, or understood, allowed, whatever the case may be, and so this is the natural reticence that people have to come back out in groups. It's like, what am I going to have to give up? It's similar to when people are asked to speak in public if they've not done it before. It's like, it's because the immediate thing is, I won't be heard. I'll be judged if I do that. What do I say? And that's the old programs coming back up. And what I want to say to people is, our job, and I consider my job, and with the Rise Up community, is to create a culture in which those things can come up and be seen and healed. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes the best way to do that is for us to be busy and focused on concrete goals, because unless you're out there doing things, it can, there isn't a driver for the evolution of your consciousness quite often. And so it's in the context of showing up to be more, showing up to be active, that those things can often show up. And it feels like it can feel hard. It can feel like a repudiation if you're being triggered in some way, but it's an opportunity to see those triggers. And so what I say is, what we're articulating here is, part of a much longer, list of things that we can do to experience freedom. And the first thing is clear seeing. We have to be able to see our values, see our beliefs, see the basis of reality. We need to be able to reflect on what's coming up for us. And we need to have the space within ourselves. In other words, it's the gift of freedom to ourselves from ourselves, which seems to make us two, which I know is its own paradox, but we are giving it's like we're acting like our own best friend when oftentimes, for many of us, we hang around as if we're our own worst enemy, judging and why did you do that? And why did you say that? And it's, if people are caught there, this is the call of freedom. This is the opportunity for freedom to come into the space. But we need to cultivate that. We need to see that, understand that,
And
and where we can reach out for help with that, not hide it, not keep it to ourselves. Like,
and I-
people walking away angry, people walking away hurt. Oh, they didn't understand me. They didn't do this. And, we need to have that freedom to be able to come back into the room, which means we need to be the adult for that inner child. We need to be the empowering force, even if it's scary, because like you were saying before, any new thing in this birthing, if we haven't come out as that person, or as that as that stronger element that we know, is that more of that soul force that we know, that we feel pushing us, which is sometimes why it makes us uncomfortable. If we haven't fully, and not that everyone is ever fully, but if we haven't taken say that next step, it can be uncomfortable because we are going into new territory.
and I trust your higher self, my higher self, your spirit, your soul, however you want to call that we are going to create it. That's why we're here. We will create it. You can't blow this, but if you have to open the heart, okay, and just be willing to be present. And the other thing you said a number of times here, which really made sense to me, and it was the word I wanted to expand on, and that was, you said the space in me, and the space that you're having community happening. And to me, it's no different on a global level of the sacred space of Mother Earth. You have sacred space. That is, you're free to be in your sacred space and be safe and be happy and joyful and creative and powerful and all the things in your sacred space. And when we come together as people in a community or in a group or in a family, one of the first things in my mind, in my heart, is I'm creating a sacred space so that all are welcome here. The good, the bad, the trauma, the this and the that. And as we're able to communicate, so people feel, and they may not feel comfortable, but they feel safe enough that they're willing to be present and put out their objections. And I mean, this would be a topic for another one, and we've talked about a little bit before, but in how we organize and make decisions as groups, it's as much about creating a sacred space where all voices are heard and you can object and you're not a bad person. The objections give us where the obstacles might be to a creative, powerful solution. So we want to hear the objections. That's good. It's like shifting those old programs that we've all been, loaded with. And so that's something that, again, it may not be simple, but it is simple. If you just, in your own being, you're creating a sacred space that is your body, mind, emotion, and spirit. That's who you are, sacred soul, eternal. And that you're talking to someone else who is also a sacred being who has sacred space. And we want to honor that and have disagreements welcome. It's not, separation doesn't have to create a battle. It can create an opportunity to heal and to grow and become more of who we are.
Yeah, well said. The way I think of that is, in the terms of freedom, as we're talking about, is if I give myself freedom to be, I can more easily give you freedom to be. The more freedom I can give you to be, the more I can experience a space of freedom between us, because there's a permission there, and it doesn't presuppose agreement on everything or anything, but there is, I guess you could say, an a priori agreement of human value, human worth, human dignity, which, without which you cannot have the conversation to begin with. And out of that comes, permission, space, skills, for example, because it's not just like, well, I'm feeling all warm and fuzzy, but they're not liking me. It's like there's some skills involved in articulating, clearly. I'm thinking of nonviolent communication, other methods where you can say, hey, this is what's going on for me. This is my core value. This is what's driving me, and what I'm hearing, you say is, and where I'm feeling anxious or afraid or kind of not met, is this whole thing here, and where we can kind of objectify the subjective, right? Kind of put it out there. It's not you did this to me and you're making, it's like, no, it's this thing over there, and we're both kind of have an ability to step back and look at it out of that place, comes freedom, comes sanity, because as you were
Yes.
saying, we're both these free will beings. And if I am giving you, if my gift to you is the complete acknowledgement of your inviolable dignity and free will, then uh, within me must be, if that is a true giving, then within me must be then the space to allow you to have whatever expressions that may be coming from you, and also the freedom within myself to not take it personally. But it's not a place that we all can get to all the time, or necessarily hold on to all the time. It's like we all get triggered, so we all need to come back in. Part of freedom, I would say, is an awareness of who we are, as embodied beings. You said it, but what does that mean to be an embodied being? Well, it means that we do have a past, that we do have a body, which is really memory. So much of it is memory. So much of what we're holding is in the body, and we do have desires and needs and fears and drives and values, and they're not always explicit. And part, it seems to me, of this move towards embodiment of freedom is to make explicit what those values are by creating the space for others and for ourselves to express those things, and by having conversation, and then by knowing, when it's time, my freedom says I'm free to now leave this situation and go take care of myself over here without feeling I need permission or need to justify or feel bad or say negative things to create a separation. It's like, no, hey, I need to go take care of myself. It's easy. It's free.
You're on to that. And let me give you an example of this, which works really well. And it comes from a meeting we just had this past week with our Vermont Restoration Council. There are about 7 of us and sometimes more. They meet every Tuesday. And I usually have something that's inspiring, like your song that you played here, or a video or a prayer or something. And then we have what we call the opening round. And what that is, it's a tuning in for you to share with the group, if you choose, where you are in that moment. What's going on? How's your day? And we'll have people say, you know what? I think I'm going to lose my job. They just announced if I don't go get that shot. And she was in tears and stressed out. So we just held the space for that. And she felt supported and received. I had a couple of documents I said after our meeting, I'll share with you things you can do. It's not necessarily over yet, okay? And we go around. Another person had been up 24/7 with a very sick child and just needed some emotional support. So rather than coming into the meeting, like a lot of people in business meetings, and you're not sharing anything energetically about where you are and what your week's been like, or what's going on for you, you're in the meeting, and then something may come up that trigger you, and then you lash out. So what you're doing is, through this fear or the separation, whatever's dysfunctional, and sharing that in your community, everyone benefits. And we all feel great because we're able to be there to put out some love and support, and for the freedom of that individual to express what's going on in their life in that moment. And everyone benefits from that. And it brings the circle together, and we have terrific meetings, and we do a closing round at the end. How did that work for everyone? So it's always a learning, a growing. We're all on the path to becoming. The prayer is, may we each become.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking of the opposite of that also. I had a member of our community, talk to me about feeling an urgency about actions that needed to be taken, and how kind of like pausing to do a survey of feelings isn't always what's required. And I guess what I want to say, what I feel like I want to say, back about that is, yeah, we are free to do that as well. We are free to say, hey, I'm leading a charge over here. My feeling is we're going to need to do X, Y, and Z by such and such a time. We're not going to stop to talk about feelings necessarily, maybe until we're done. Maybe, are you with me? And so there's, if you're joining that person in a way, you're subsuming yourself under an authority structure, but you're still free. You're understanding what the limits are. You're playing a game for a period of time with a person or a group of people for a an agreed upon outcome, and maybe some agreed upon process. That doesn't mean you have to stick around the whole time, or that
Let me
there's
add that. Let me add a little bit more because it fits right
good.
into what you're saying.
Good.
The rest of this process is when I said this is an opening round, okay, and you can choose to not share anything. It's 30 seconds, a minute, okay, because everyone is aware the purpose of us gathering is for an agenda, for things we're going to accomplish. We're only meeting for an hour, okay, and whoever's the facilitator, which rotates, their job is to begin on time and end on time and keep the group focused on the decision making, because that's the goal that everyone has in being part of this group. We want to make creative decisions, okay? However, we also want to honor each individual and where they are. And if there's something that they'd like to share with us about where they're at, it gives everybody more information and more ability to energetically work as a team. We don't go off on a tangent. And if there's someone that needs more, we have an agreement that at the end of the meeting, when the meeting's time is up, we've done our closing round, we've ended the business, people can agree to meet beyond that, and we can go into it.
Yeah.
So again, the truth and the freedom is there for everyone to be who they are, but we have a sacred space context in which we can create, and we have room for everyone to be seen and heard.
Yeah, exactly. It's the background context that allows everything else, and it's the recognition that we are inherently diverse, and that's part of the freedom to be the unique person within the group, is to understand that our what we're downloading from perhaps different levels of experience, different dimensions of intuition, what we're seeing, what we're wanting based on our life experience, based on the issues that are in front of us, based on what we can project and what we want and what we envision and what our hearts are calling to us for. All of that is going to be part of how we express and continue to evolve our uniqueness. And if we're doing that in a space of permission, then where's the law? So I guess I kind of maybe just want to start closing it out here on this, on a little bit of a pushback that I feel like I need to do. It's both an understanding and a pushback. The pushback is on this notion of, if we're doing for the group, that means we're self-sacrificing. And I want to call that a Piscean age concept. And it's not that there isn't a place for it, and that, every parent hasn't experienced that, and every lover or friend hasn't experienced a time where you put your needs aside for the moment. But there is an idea, I think, that causes a false separation and a resistance to the notion of community and divinity and unity. Let's say the whole unity prospect that's presupposes that, I'm going to have to go self-sacrifice myself. And I think that's a Piscean age concept. I believe that where we're going in the Aquarian age is more of a this and. So it's like you get, the decisions you get to make have to work for you. Yeah. Certainly, you're the first among equals, shall we say, because each of us is in the center of our own experience of the universe. That's the way it works. But I recognize that you're over there, and you're over there, and you're over there, and if I am acting, out of the good of the whole, it is not just a concept, but it is an active engagement with you. And then you get to make your comments, your requests, your observations, and then I'm deciding, hey, I'm feeling into this, and what works for me. But I can believe, and I can see, and I can feel, because I have through my own experience, that as we engage in that, my circle of care expands, my circle of compassion expands, not to do things for you as a parent would for a child, but to do things with you in this interdependent kind of geometric expansion way that we were talking about before.
Yeah, that's the consent versus consensus to me. That's still within your range to object to something or consent. But if there is an agreement in your particular group that we're here to decide if we're going to play the venue next week as a band together, that's the goal that we all have and share. but each of us comes to that with the ability to object and put it on the table. Let's see what the potential separation places are. And we work that through, we honor that in each individual. And at the same time, we're all committed to the common good. We don't have to sacrifice anything. At the end of the day, we can abstain. We know that life is change, and the decision we make right this moment, if a week from now we blew the decision, we make another decision. It's about living totally in the present, because the mind is going to take us into the past, the traumas, our childhood, all that. We have that with us all the time. But the more we can create a sacred space and honor what is the focus of the moment that we all are agreeing to, then what do we need to bring to that? And we all can be in different places, and we can all, deal with it in a way that's consent. We don't have to all agree, but we're willing in that moment, because we're committed to making a decision for this gig, that we will end up at some point making a decision, consent or not. And so it's subtle, but it's powerful, and it's both, as you're saying, it's yes and, it's the individual and the unity. Again, caring, compassion, and collaboration. Those are, for me, the cornerstones of our freedom discussion here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for this. And I know there's a lot more to say. We had a lot of notes that we shared, and, I want to, maybe in the future talk more about this, this area of what could be called self-authorship. It's developing that internal freedom you can even go beyond that, but there's, I think, a whole realm of skills and meta skills involved in making sure we're continuing to do that. There's ways that we, I think, are needing to go out in our relationships and community and, start acting from this space and also, I think, articulating it as we each are called to and as we each understand it. It could be just through a kind word. It could be through a song. It could be through a poem. It could be through kind of the exploration that we're doing here today, done with family members or friends, like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm working on that, or, I want to in future time talk about, the Constitution and Bill of Rights and kind of what we've inherited and how we can think about that going forward to strengthen this notion of liberty, which I think is very key in this reality, and that
sovereignty, law, those kind of things would be excellent.
Yeah, and it's been pounded on by totalitarian forces, but it's not wrong also to say that we need to understand how we fit into and how we interact with and maximally benefit the whole that we're part of, because there's a way that to be in that conversation and in that emergence that where our individuality and our gifts and our uniqueness and our needs are considered and amplified, and then flow into activities and life expressions with the natural world, with our social groups, with our friends and family, that I think have yet to be really unearthed. I think many of us have touched into it. Many of us have felt into it, but I believe that there are, things ready to emerge for us in terms of our heartful understanding of who we are in the universe and who we are in social relation, that I think are going to blow our minds, hearts, and souls, and really show us something that we've really all been waiting for, and our hearts have been calling for, that I think really know. We know it inside. And we experience it here and there, but in this larger way, in this tumult, in this place of polarity and friction, it seems very far away quite often. And so we're being called, I think, to embody that.
Yeah, I'm with you. One breath at a time here. Keep the focus in our hearts, and let's be the love, let's be the freedom that we want to see in the world. And as we are that, it will be. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a good way to put an end to that conversation for today. But I look forward to exploring these other things with you soon, Paul. So thank you so much.
Always. Thank you so much, John Michael.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.